All right, everybody, welcome back. And we are going to talk about the latest product that we're building. It's actually a tool for Ext JS that we've decided to call Rapid Ext JS. So I'm going to do my best to show you what we have so far. It is an early version, so I just know which way to go so it doesn't break, but it may do that anyway, but we'll see. So here we are. I guess we're going to go to from now till 12:15, and then lunchtime. So I'll get you out and ready to go. And as I said, whatever I'm showing you, whatever I might say, I totally deny it. Nope, I didn't say it. The reality is the product is pretty new, and if it's something that interests you and you want to get involved and maybe get some feedback in or whatever, this is a good time to do it. Also, later in the slide deck, I found a slide where I introduce people to the Discord server. So I'll have a Discord server URL for you guys if you want to sign up. So that's probably a good place to go. And I just grabbed this slide from the keynote. As you saw, one of the themes that we're trying to stress is what we're calling low-code tooling. So the idea here is you certainly could write your entire ExtJS application in a code editor. Many people do. But it is really nice to have tools that make the job easier. Things like Sencha Architect, tools like Sencha Architect have been around that aid in doing that, although Sencha Architect has its limitations and concerns. It's a great product, got a lot of functionality in it. The biggest issue with it is, well, two issues. One, you have to pick Sencha Architect as your editor. I mean, there's no other choice. And you never can leave the Sencha Architect environment to go edit your code, because once you do, you break the backend metadata that associates your code with the tooling, and then from there on out, it won't work. So we want to fix both those problems. And in doing so, we decided to take a look at what made the most sense to implement a low-code development tool in. And I don't know about you guys, but I use Visual Studio Code quite a bit in my daily work. I know there are other tools out there, but it's not only a very popular editor, but it has a really, really nice extension model. It's really well documented. And one of the things we've done is built one of the plugins that is built is written for Visual Studio Code. This is not that plugin. This is a completely different tool. It has a different path. It is much, much more visual, as you'll see in a bit here. But the way I try to describe this tool to people is that it is on a path to, over time, take on more and more of the functionality that you tend to see in Sencha Architect. So someday it could replace Sencha Architect. It is not replacing Sencha Architect anytime soon. Sencha Architect is not going away, but this is kind of the future of that product. So we'll talk about what the product is. You may have heard it called different names. As a matter of fact, in the morning slides, it was called something different. So I'll go into a little bit of that. As I said, probably the biggest comparison is to Sencha Architect. And as you would imagine, the things we think are challenges with the product, we want to address. Then we'll actually just go into a demo. We'll look at what I've got so far. We'll build a little bit of a UI, see how it works, see how we've integrated the current tooling in. Sencha Command, XGen, all integrated in. And then talk a little bit about the plans. Probably one of the biggest things is that we're going to have a beta upcoming. And what I asked the team to do is to create a form just for us that you guys can submit your interest. So I've got the URL. It's not something you can just write down, but I'll have the slides to the team here, and you'll be able to do it and get some information on the product as it evolves. and certainly some Q&A. So, wow, a lot to read there. I took a lot of these slides from some of the internal discussions that we've been having, and I'll just kind of highlight a few things that probably makes relevant sense to you guys. So the product currently is called Rapid Ext JS. As you can see, it was known for a while as VS Code Extension 4 of Sencha Architect. It was confusing because why put the name of a product in a new product name? So I like the name. It's cool. I like the logo. It's cool. That's always important. I think the biggest thing is just to understand how to use it, where it's intending to be. As you can expect, a lot of drag and drop, being able to use components. If you've used Architect, that is the model. So it is called Rapid Ext JS or Rapid Ext JS, however you pronounce that. So VS Code extension of Sencha Architect or anything related to that, that is now Rapid Ext JS. And the plugin, as I said, the plugins that we've written for Sencha Command are different. So right now we have two efforts going. We have the plugin for VS Code, and we have Rapid Ext JS, which only is being built for VS Code at the moment. So hopefully that isn't any more confusion. So I've already talked a little bit about this, but this most compared with Sencha Architect. At least this is an exhaustive list, but the first one is the one we get the most comments about with Sencha Architect. Can you remove the metadata requirement? Well, we're not going to remove the metadata requirement in Architect, but we are going to build this product, Rapid Ext JS, with no metadata requirement. So it will never have one, which means you can go into VS Code, edit, use or not use the extension, go over to IntelliJ, edit, whatever you want to do, Notepad if you want to do that, come back in here and you'll have full fidelity. That's a big challenge. I mean, we've taken on a pretty good challenge because there's so many different ways you can create views and the like, but that's why this product's going to take some time as it matures. We did choose VS Code as an extension. We are trying to architect it so that as we eventually move to different extension environments, we can keep the core, but it is highly oriented towards VS Code at the moment. It does utilize the NPM version of our tooling, open tooling, or XGen, however you want to call it. So you'll see that in a moment here as I do some of the demonstration. Very early in the life cycle. This is really the first, I think this is the first time we're talking about this product publicly. So I think we made a mention of it in a blog, but we've never done a demo. So bear with me on that one. And again, more and more functionality as we move forward. We don't have a date yet for the beta, but I've been told that we're really shooting for some sort of an early beta within the quarter. So we'll see if we get to that point. But again, remember that first slide, everything I say. All right, so let's start going into it, give you an idea how this thing works. I'm going to be very bold. I'm going to uninstall and then reinstall. I hope I don't mess things up, but we'll see. If you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code, it's just a browser-based editor. And here it is. I'm just running it. I'm obviously on a Mac. You can be on Windows. You can be on Linux. It is, from my understanding, written pretty much in JavaScript. So it's pretty cool. And as I said, the extension model for VS Code is pretty dramatic. There are a lot of extensions out there. In the production world, there is a VS Code extension marketplace where you can search for things. And in this particular case, since we're so early, we don't even have it. There's nothing in the marketplace yet. I do have it installed right here, but I can I'm not going to uninstall it. I just not feeling that good today. No, I will. I'll uninstall it. And obviously, I don't have anything in the environment right now. If you happen to have just a VSIX, which is the extension for extensions, if you have the file, you can actually go to install it right from the file system. And in this particular case, I have our GitHub repo, and I just built it as of this morning. I'm really, I'm living on the edge here. We'll see what happens. I tested it, but we'll see. So I install it just like any other extension. It will eventually show up here in case it doesn't like me. It says it installs. And if I scroll down here, there it is. There's the Rapid Ext JS environment. And there's no meaning to this particular number. As I said, we're working towards the beta. But now it's installed. So what can I do now that it's installed? Probably the biggest thing I can do two things. I can either bring up an existing application, doesn't have to have been built with the extension, or I can create a new ExtJS application. And as you see down here now, I have this little tool, this little menu item here, new ExtJS application, and I'll start there. And it's thinking. It better not think too long. Let me try it again. Again, I told you I was going to be bold on it, but we'll give it a try here. Come on, you. I swear I just tried it this morning. So I'm gonna close and open up again, just because it's going to be that way to me. So I just created a new VS Code window. The extension is already installed, so the new ExtJS app will show up automatically, and of course it's going to do that to me, right? All right, we're going to do this one more time because I'd like to show you it all the way through. So I'm going to go ahead and uninstall it. It reloads. I'll go ahead and install it again. It's not there, just to make sure. We'll go ahead and install it. If not, I have a backup, don't worry, which hopefully will work. So I was this latest version that I just ran. You'll see no load ExtJS project until it loads. And of course, it's not going to do that. All right, so this isn't the exciting part of it, as long as the next part works. So the idea here is we give you a nice UI. You select the toolkit you want to use. One of the interesting things we're experimenting with, if those of you who are familiar with Sencha Command, you know, well, maybe you don't even know, there was a whole template infrastructure built in Sencha Command. So the idea was that over time, you could be building your own templates that were customized to the way you wanted to generate applications. You could store them somewhere, probably on your hard drive or a local share or something like that. And then what you could do is you could bring that template in, and then applications would be built against those templates. Not that many people know that exists, so everybody uses the default template. So we rethought that a little bit and said, well, where's really the appropriate place to put templates? I'm really mad this is not starting up because I just ran this. But the right place to put templates is in, and I was losing, let me see if I can do this. That's it. We've been having some issues with the network. But the right place to put templates, come on, dude. The right place to put templates is in a GitHub repository because it's clonable. You could have your own GitHub repo. You could point to the GitHub repo. So that's what we've started to do with Rapid Ext JS. We started to put templates in the GitHub repo. And what this dialog will do, again, I apologize for it not loading, but it will actually call the underlying tooling. It's going to call XGen, because XGen is the most appropriate tooling here in building a modern application. We support the classic and modern toolkit. We support quote unquote universal applications, which is not a toolkit per se, but it's the ability to have multiple profiles in one application. And had I done that here, I would have been able to create an application. And this application is what I created just a moment ago. And I'm going to try and bring it up and see if it behaves a little bit better here. So creating the app sits there. You're going to get a command line user interface. It's going to show you all the things you're typically used to. if you run xgen or if you run Sencha command, and then it'll eventually get to a watch point. That's the whole idea here. So it will also generate by default your web server. If you guys are used to Sencha command, the web server being at port 1841, this one's at port 2020 at the moment. That's the default, and it's changeable with the UI. The extension environment for VS Code is really nice. It gives you a nice place where you can put different parameters, and the port you want it to start out at is one of them. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in this and see if it's going to behave a little bit here. Okay, let me close this a little bit. So this, I just ran this, creating a universal application with the universal template that we had, and I just generated it. So we'll see if it behaves with us. And you'll notice here that one of the things I have, besides the regular UI for the Explorer, is I have some sort of an interface for packages. I can look at a component hierarchy, and I also have action commands. So I'm going to see if maybe this thing was stuck on watch, but we've got a couple of default actions that are starting to build. Stop, starting. This is the same as Sencha app watch. And there we go. We're getting some information there. Is it not going to start? As that's starting, okay, it stopped. Let me go into what I hope will be an available UI here. So I'm in a typical generated universal application. So it has multiple profiles. So under the app folder, it generated a desktop profile. It generated a phone profile. You have as many profiles as you want. They don't need to be named desktop and phone. And then there's a shared section where shared code would go. So under desktop, I have a view. I don't understand why this is not. You know what I'm going to try to do here? You guys are really going to be excited about this because I'm going to rebuild it. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to go back over here. You get a glimpse, which you'll never see until this is done. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the Visual Studio source code for this thing. Let me sort this in order here. There we go. I'm going to build another version right in front of us. So I'm going to name this one version 11, since the other one was 10. So you develop Visual Studio Code extensions in Visual Studio. How exciting. And we have a build step that is down here that says to build this, we do build VSIX. So npm run build. I don't know what would be different, but we'll try it. So this is just going to build a regular VSIX. All of the steps in building an extension are widely available. And in my opinion, what's nice about committing to an environment that lets you build extensions is you guys can build your own. I've built plenty of little miscellaneous extensions to help me do things within Visual Studio. Even though you can do this with the plugin, that's why we built the plugin. You could take little snippets, build your own snippet library. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do that I think are very helpful. So we'll go ahead and build this. We'll have version 11 here, and it's done. So let me see if that somehow solved things here. I'm going to install, and I'm in Visual Studio Code extension. There's the version 11. I'll know it's installed by the time I have that new app, and I'm going to just see if it'll let me. Come on. That's crazy. I just wonder, let me see if I have network connection. That might be at the moment it is tied to a network. So as I said, where we retrieve the network is there. Where we retrieve Let me just try one more time, and then we can discuss it. You know. Finally. Okay. I don't know what was who knows, right? And as I said, I gave you enough fair warning that this is an early version. So what I've done, imagine I've already generated this application. I mean, it wasn't exciting if that would have actually generated. It just goes through the steps that Sencha command goes through. Finally, when it finishes, it brings up a new instance of VS Code with your newly generated app inside of it. As I said, by default, the application is going to be running on port 2022. Now, it may or may not be running on port 2022 at the moment because I just restarted. I just started it. So I'm going to restart Watch, and this is just like Sencha App Watch, but it's running it with XGen. And as soon as it's running, you can see here I'm starting to get some Webpack info. I start to get some XGen info in here, some regular EXT Sencha command info, and eventually, just like in a Sencha command app, it's going to start and then wait. So it'll finish here. As it's doing that, I'll bring up a browser window, and I'll go to port 2020. And so here's that starter app. So it should look similar if you've ever generated a universal app with XGen, it's the same template. So I'm looking at the desktop template right now. If I wanted to, I could switch to emulate a phone and show the phone template, and I'm not going to do that at the moment, but you'll kind of see some of that. And I've already done a little bit of work in here. So let me just talk a little bit about the editor and how it works. So you'll notice that I have a visual representation of that page. If I go over here, I have an ability to shift between code view and design view. So here's the code view version of that page. This is the only thing that governs the design view. Again, no metadata. It's purely reading off of the configuration that we have in the view. I can go toggle between design view and code view. I can do split view. So that gives me the code on one side and this on the other side. And no matter which side I edit from, it will be reflected in the other side. The one thing to note is I have on my Visual Studio Code environment, auto save set to true. So I don't have to hit save. So if I come over here, I can actually select items. Here I'm selecting the grid. You can tell because it's a little small of a screen. The tooling window will show me that. I can select the grid on the other side, or I can go back and forth. And let's say if I come over here, I'll do it on this side first. I'm going to go ahead and delete the grid on this side. So, obviously that whatever I do on one side will affect the other side. I also have a button here. I could delete that button. I'm just going to start from scratch here. So I have just a plain palette with the ability to deal with the code here. Let me close this just so we have enough room, and let me close this. So what I'm looking at right now is the visual editor, the toolbox. The bottom is the output window doing the Sencha App Watch. And I have all of my categories of components. So I could, for example, open up a grid, drag and drop it to the page. I will get that capability. What we're trying to do, and some of the feedback that we got, is that when we're dragging and dropping components, instead of just doing the basics and then I have to kind of look up and help, how do I do what I really want to do, make it more of an intelligent drag and drop. So if you notice here, and I go into split view, not only did I drag and drop a grid, but it also included a store, maybe not the complete store that you might need, but it included one, and it included columns, which could be visually edited. So even from the get-go, you have something that is visually running. And because I have the environment running, I now have that grid available to me on this page. Now, this is always running in the background. It's just a little bit hard to show everything. So let me just drag one more thing. Let me drag a button. So here It's just a regular button. I'll put that, notice the tool is intelligent. It knows where components are. It knows where things can be dragged. I'll just drag that to the bottom here. I can go over here and change the text property, for example. I can say, pick me, and now it's updated. Typical things you expect it to do. You'll notice that there's a little bit of contextual help that is here. If I go to a particular item, all of that information is coming from the documentation or the metadata that we put in the SDK. So this product improves as more correct metadata goes into the SDK. Some of the challenges are that we define in the documentation the data types for certain objects. Like certain objects are integers, certain objects are strings. There are a lot of objects that can be integers, strings, objects. They can be all three. And so figuring out what to do from a UI point of view is going to be a little bit challenging. So one of the efforts that's going on right now is a cleanup to make things a little bit more precise. But in general, there are certain configs that can be any of those. So we're going to have to build those UIs to be able to handle that. What the properties are pretty well defined. Not only the properties, but if I were to want to put in an event as well, for a button, this is Modern Toolkit. I could go over here to the event bindings and I can select an event. I'll just scroll down to basically the equivalent of the click event in the Modern Toolkit, which is tap. So by doing that, a couple of things happen. I have now a click event or a tap event associated with the code. So if I bring the code over here, indeed, there's my tap event. And it is intelligent enough to know that, hey, I should have a view controller associated with this view. And in that view controller, which is named by best practices, this is home view. Home view has a controller named home view controller. And now home view controller has that tap event. The UI will ultimately be able to allow you to go directly to the tap event. But again, early beta, it's not doing that. So right now I just put in, whatever, just a little alert. And now when this gets regenerated, it has, nice features like it'll automatically reload, it'll detect the automatic reload. So the idea is that even though you fundamentally have the same code that you would have to write by hand, that, that guided path of what you're used to in Sencha Architect will be available, but two other things will also be true. As I said, no metadata. I can go into any editor right now and edit this, or I can bring in a project that I'm using. I don't have to worry about its metadata requirements. And this idea of intelligent components, where I can get a better start from the tool than rather just a raw grid. For example, a click button, it would make sense to already have a tap event there and already just configure all that. So things like that we're going to put in place. The other thing we're going to try to do is we're going to try to expose more of the documentation right within the user interface. So we've got a lot of documentation that we've created. For example, the grids that exist out there. If I go over to Sencha.com, grids not only have kitchen sink documentation, but we have quite a bit of documentation that we wrote specifically for grids, which is above and beyond the documentation in the kitchen sink. And all of these examples, we want to somehow bring that into the tool so that instead of you having to search for examples, they'll just be brought to you. And maybe they'll just be, you pick a grid, a pop-up pops up and it says, what kind of grid are you trying to use? Are you trying to use grouping? Are you trying to use some sort of an intelligent UI that knows, hey, these are the fundamental parts that you probably want to deal with when it comes to a grid. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of an idea of what the tool is all about. Let's go back over here and talk a bit about other things. So unfortunately, you get the exciting wait and watch of creating an application, but a good demo always has a backup. So I was glad I did that. So let's talk about where this product is going. So right now we're trying to get ready for beta. We're trying to get enough functionality in so that the beta is meaningful. For the rest of 2022, this is kind of a high-level laundry list of the preliminary items that are going to go into the product. Generating a dynamic view of any selected file. That's kind of what you saw. I can bring in any code, any view. We haven't done all the permutations of whatever you might be able to do. We're only going to be able to handle static views. So if you have an architecture where you bring in maybe a panel and there's nothing in the items collection and you dynamically read that from a database, we can't dynamically design that. But if you have static configs, or if you want to start out with static configs and then evolve from that, the end resultant application that you build that doesn't use static configs will still be able to be edited, but the only intelligence in the tool will be for anything that's static. Drag and drop of components. We've got the general architecture for that already. Editing of configs. What we have to do there is we have to get very, very specific as to the data types. So for example, if you put a grid on your page and you want to set the store config, well, there's probably somewhere in the app where there are a list of stores, right? And the app knows about those stores. So an intelligent drop down of the stores that you already created, or the location where a store should be stored, would be there to allow you to perhaps create a store object just from the creation of the setting of that config. Creating a view with a context menu in any folder. Yeah, this wouldn't be governed by a specific structure. We are really pushing for best practices, to follow a structure that we recommend, but a lot of people have different reasons to use different structures. We want to support that. That's not something that Architect can do. No metadata boundary, I've said that already. Edit the project in any IDE, go back, go forward, do whatever you need to do. The next one is a big one. As I mentioned, the challenge for Architect up till now has been that every version of ExtJS that came out needed that SDK in the Architect bundle. So Architect kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until finally with version 7.6, we said, stop, we can't do that. So we produced, and it is now available, a version of Architect that just has 7.6 embedded in it. And we are working on the next version that will allow for a dynamic interaction with any SDK. We are building this product from the ground up without any need to store any SDK. There shouldn't be a need. We know where the SDKs are. We know how to identify them. They're all in GitHub repos. That's the approach we're going to take. We are also leaning quite a bit towards the NPM approach to things. If you've ever used XGen, or if you're going to look at XGen, the entire SDK is in NPM packages. So that's what we rely on here, and that's kind of the mechanism we're going to use moving forward. And of course, there's an upcoming beta. And I expect you to memorize this link. Wow. There's probably a way we can make that a little prettier. But again, this is not an official on the Sencha website link. This is specifically for you guys, since we're going through this and you're the first ones to see it. So we'll make this link available somehow, either on the website or we'll have the slides. And we'll keep you guys notified if you're interested in getting on the beta. Just let us know. A simple little form. And then, as I said, I also, since I talked about this morning, if you want to join the Discord server, which I would highly encourage you to do, there is a link behind this slide. So this link, which is a little bit easier, but still a lot of specifics. We're not really advertising it, but we should be. You can join and then take a look at what's out there. As I said, a lot of good MVPs. We're going to open up a beta channel for Rapid Ext JS, but there are a lot of things out there that are really good from a resource point of view. So we'll make that available to you as well. So yeah, so there's a high level overview. We've got about 5-10 minutes. Maybe you guys have some questions. Maybe you have some, what are the futures of this? I know as much as I know. I mean, we were debating whether to even show this, and I said, yeah, that's what you guys are, potentially the most significant people to see this. So please, any questions or any comments on the product? Yeah.
You showed one view, the home view. Will it be possible to show that from further ago and change layouts or navigation trees?
Yeah, we're initially focusing, and I could have opened any one of these views, and it'll open up the view. Again, remember, it has to be a static layout. There's not much on these. This is just the template. We're focusing on the views to begin with. We're focusing on laying out the views and all the different ways you can lay it out, VBox, HBox, all of that stuff. Anything dynamic, things like menus, we're trying to figure out the right way to do that would be applicable to everybody. I mean, there's so many different, I've seen so many different ways of a Sencha application being built. It's like, where do we stop? But yes, that's on the radar. We probably won't have a lot of the dynamic, but it'll be mostly static stuff for the initial beta. But yes, we are, we want to make this as robust as possible. And if you guys have ideas, if you say, boy, here's an example that I've seen that does this, or the kind of things that we really struggle with Architect is this, make your voice known. Make it known on the Discord channel. Put it in as a support ticket, even though that doesn't sound logical. Put it in as a support ticket. It'll get to the right people. Let me know, and we can get some of that in there. So,
can you also use custom components?
You would also be able to use custom components as long as they're written as Sencha custom components. Absolutely. Yeah, the way we retrieve the list of components is via the documentation. So if you were to write a custom component, you would want to follow, the same standard way. There was someone I was talking to this morning about just building custom components. I'm going to try to do a little bit of research to see if we have anything really, in detail for how to build custom components, but that's probably something we need. But yeah, as long as they were written to the kind of the spec of how the SDK does it, then yes, you'd be able to access those. Yep. Which will be very powerful, especially if you just, let's say you override, you have your own grid, or you override a panel. To be able to have your users drag and drop your panel as opposed to just the base panel would be very powerful. Yep. What else? What other questions? You're stunned, I can tell. No. We're looking forward to get this out there. Like I said, it is admittedly very early, but we're making very good progress, and we're looking for a lot of feedback in the beta. And let's say everything goes plan, maybe by mid to end next year we can get something out as a V1 product. So I'll stick around for good. One question, another question.
Will it integrate there?
That's a great question. Yeah, we think the decision to build as much of this in VS Code is a solid one, and so that next step would be to integrate, just not have a separate themer product per se, but just have theming capabilities built in, kind of like the way Architect does. So that's kind of the way we're thinking right now. It shouldn't be a disjointed experience necessarily. So yeah, so themer type functionality would be a part of this. Eventually, and this is way down the road, testing could be part of this as well. So as a platform, we haven't done a refresh of the tooling platform since Architect was built a long time ago. So this is kind of exciting for me that we're finally getting into the to this world, and there's a lot of opportunities here. So. All right. Like I said, I'll stick around for a few minutes. You want to come up, but I guess we have lunch in about like 5 minutes or so. Yeah. Thank you.